Where Hollywood Hides. Here's Bob and Suzanne.
Chicken joke!
I'm Mrs. Cleaver.
From Television City in Hollywood.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller plays.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
We're on a mission from God.
Run, Forrest, run!
We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
You had me at hello.
Nano.
Baby, you're the great.
I'm not going to be ignored.
Here comes the judge.
Go ahead. Make my day.
I got nowhere else to go!
Small cowbell.
Matt Basher.
There's anything wrong with that. You can't handle the truth.
I'm not an actor, I'm a movie star!
That's the story of my life. No respect. I don't get no respect at all.
I'm the dude.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And now for something completely different.
There's no business like show business like no business I know.
Hi, welcome to Where Hollywood Hides. This is podcast episode number 41. My name is Bob McCullough.
And my name is Suzanne Herrera McCullough.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Bob.
I'm so excited today. We're talking to Philip Taylor.
Our British friend.
Our British friend, trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and his career spans comedy, drama, features. He worked with Robin Williams in his very first television series. He has some great stories, and looking forward to talking to him.
Speaking about British,
Yes?
the critics are just raving about Joan Collins. She apparently made her grand appearance on the TV show The Royals.
She was great. We saw it last night.
She plays the Grand Duchess, and, Elizabeth Hurley is the mainstay of the show, and apparently Joan Collins really outdid her.
How old is she?
She's 81.
That's unbelievable.
Anyway, I can't wait to ask Philip what he thinks about the Royals, and I think I know, especially since he comes from a Shakespearean background.
Yes. Hey, listen, before we get going and talking to Philip, I want to remind everybody to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com and check out our new book, Where Hollywood Hides.
Santa Barbara.
Celebrities in Paradise.
Great for a gift, Father's Day, maybe even graduation.
It's a hardcover, full-color edition. Features a number of celebrities, full-color pictures, their bios, career histories. It's a great read. It's available with no shipping on our website at wherehollywoodhides.com. You can go there and you'll get immediate delivery, or you can go to Amazon.com. You'll find it there. It's also at local bookstores. So please check it out. You'll find it's a pretty interesting read.
Okay, well, here's Philip.
Hello, Philip.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm terrific.
Hi, Philip.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Fine. Long time no talk, huh?
Oh, no talk or see or hear.
That's right.
Really. So, Philip Taylor, you are one of the most unusual writers I've ever known in that, A, you're a great writer, a great collaborator, very fluent, can write on the turn of a dime, basically. But you're also a foreigner.
Well, so was Goethe, so was Shakespeare, so was Tolstoy.
Well, you're putting yourself in very good company, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Philip, we're just really jealous because of your accent.
Well,
Americans love accents. You know that, right?
I know. And actually, it's a little more pronounced now because I was back in England quite recently. My mother passed away, but that's not even...
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay. And... So when I'm in England, it starts to come back, and in a couple of weeks I'll sound like I'm from Tennessee again. But.
Oh, really? Okay.
So when you go back home, do people think that you're very Americanized with your accent?
Yes, very much so. It's not a conscious thing. It was my father kept his Devonian accent, which is actually where the American accent comes from. Because don't forget, they were the Plymouth Rock guys.
That's right.
They sailed from Plymouth and Devon. And so my father was often mistaken for an American.
Really?
When he went outside of Devonshire, when he went to London, for instance. But he kept his accent. My mother, unconsciously or consciously, I'm not quite sure, would change her accent with whoever she was talking to. Almost like a social thing.
I love that. That's wonderful.
So when she was talking to someone who was a little upper class, my mother would suddenly sound like the Queen.
Funny. That's funny.
That's a hard thing to do.
So let's go back a little bit. Tell us how you have a lot of credits and you have a wide range of credits. There aren't many people who have done feature films, comedy, television, as well as drama. So we're going to try to figure out how that happens. Tell us a little bit about your childhood in England and what led you to come to the States. Were your parents in the entertainment field?
No. I came from the English equivalent of Kansas. Very rural. Devonshire is quite a rural county. And by and large, my best friend, Richard Wilson, his uncle owned the only movie theater in this very small town where we lived. And so I got to see all the movies for free from the age of 5. And somewhere along the line, I just wanted to be Rod Steiger.
Okay. Was it the pawnbroker or?
No, much earlier than that. We're talking on the waterfront. Al Capone.
Right.
Yeah, and I just fell in love with acting, and then when I went into high school, or what we call grammar school, Mr. Watton, the English teacher, put me in a production of The Merchant of Venice, the annual school production. And it wasn't a big part, but it was a nice part. And I went, this is pretty, I like this. I really do like this. And everyone thought I was pretty good, and that was it. I had the bug. It never occurred to me to get into anything else in showbiz because, I didn't really know that much. I was from Devonshire. So it never occurred to me to do anything about directing or writing. Acting was the only thing I knew. And so when I was 18, I applied to go to RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, which is still, I think, the best acting school in the world.
The Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, that's all Shakespeare, isn't it?
No, not really. Well, for instance, Timothy Dalton, one of the James Bonds, was in my class. What they do is they try to teach you a very broad style of acting, which is why English actors have taken over American television, if you think about it. They are adept at playing anything from Shakespeare to The Walking Dead. The leading actor in The Walking Dead is an English guy. Actually, he was born pretty close to where I was born. And so as a result, they try to give you a really grounded course of acting, which basically means you can do sitcoms or you can do Henry V. And I think that's why English drama schools, particularly RADA and Central School, which is where people like Helen Mirren came from, are so effective at producing really good actors. So I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Then I went into the Bristol Old Vic Company, which usually, if you are heading towards a theatrical career, because there wasn't much television back then in the 60s, if you think about it, especially in England, there was the BBC, and there was ITV, which is the commercial channel, but that's it. There were 2 channels. So what do your parents think about this at the time? I mean, you're a bright guy. You could have become a doctor or something, Well, that's what, funny, that's exactly what my mother said to me. She said, why are you going to university? I said, well, I'm going to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. Now, they were actually quite worried. And then, of course, when I became successful and was gainfully employed, all of a sudden that was great, and they were very proud of me. But no, they met the announcement that I was going to pursue acting with great trepidation. But anyway, so usually if you're heading for a stage career, because I said there wasn't much television production in England at all, and certainly no British American co-production as there is today, and a lot of movies, such as, the whole Star Wars franchise, were shot in England and are still being shot in England, because it's just a little cheaper and the sound stages are better. So I went into the Bristol Old Vic, and at the age of 22, was fortunate enough to travel 8 months throughout America and Europe on tour, which you can imagine. We visited every major city in America, and then we went over to Europe and actually to Israel. We were in Jerusalem about a week after the Six-Day War, which was a phenomenal experience.
So are you guys like you're traveling, you're a show on the road kind of a thing?
We were touring with 2 productions. We were doing Hamlet with Richard Pascoe, and Romeo and Juliet with, believe it or not, Jane Asher playing Juliet. I don't know if you remember who Jane Asher
Sure.
is.
Sure. I like her.
And what role were you playing?
I was playing. Actually, I was playing a small role. I was playing Capulet and understudying Mercutio. Unfortunately, the guy playing Mercutio was very healthy, and I never got to go on. And of course, this was the Summer of Love. This was 1967, and Paul McCartney would fly out all the time to see her, while we were on the road. So,
cool.
I met him several times.
Cool.
Anyway, so then came back to the Bristol Old Vic, and I started working at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and was there for several years. On one of our tours, again, we toured the States, Japan, Australia. I mean, it's a wonderful way to see the world.
So when you're involved at that level, are you working every day? I mean, are you showing up and rehearsing every day and then performing?
6 days a week, yeah.
Okay.
And then Saturday, the only day you really get off is Sunday, because in those days there were laws that prohibited theatrical performances on Sundays. That's changed, of course.
So it's a real education and work ethic, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. You're in there usually most mornings at 8:30 to do either a dance or a movement class.
So, Philip, do you remember your first impression of the States?
My first impression of the States was January in Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first tour, first stop on the tour.
Well, that's one aspect.
I was just I'd done a lot of research and I'd seen a lot of films, of course, but I was just overwhelmed by the States. And, somewhere in the back of my mind was the fact that someday I was going to live here.
Oh, really?
I wanted to live here, yeah. So on one of our tours with the RSC, I met Susan, my soon-to-be ex-wife. I don't mean soon-to-be now, but we were only married for about 4 or 5 years. And the idea was, when we got married, she would come and join me in Stratford. But then, out of the blue, on tour, I had met a man called Alex Siegel at a party. And I don't know if that name sounds familiar, but Alex Siegel was one of that brilliant group of 50s early television directors, along with Sidney Lumet, John Frankenheimer.
The golden age guys, right.
Yeah, and Alex Siegel went into films. He did a movie with Richard Chamberlain. I can't remember the name of it now. But he was he was a manic depressive. He had a terrible temper, and people just didn't want to work with him. And ironically, I did work with Richard Chamberlain later on. We had nothing whatsoever that was good to say about Alex Siegel. So Siegel's career kind of was in, the tide was flowing out, and he acquired a position he was the head of the theater department and the television department at USC. And I met him in this party, and out of the blue, I got this phone call when I was in Stratford asking me if I'd be interested in coming out and teaching acting at USC for 2 years.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, this is perfect. Don't forget, this was the early 70s. Los Angeles was a totally different place than it is now. And so I thought, this is terrific. 2 years, and then I'll come back. And I spoke to Trevor Nunn, who was at that time running the RSC. And he said, sure, go for 2 years, and then come on back. And, of course, I never did, because the first thing that happened was I got into a production. Jonathan Miller, one of England's top directors at that time, he was also one of the 4 people in Beyond the Fringe, that huge British hit review. In the 60s. Jonathan Miller came out to direct Richard Chamberlain in Richard II at the Amundsen Theatre in L.A., and knew of me and knew that I was there and asked me if I'd be interested in playing O'Merle, which I did. That show went to the Kennedy Center after we played in L.A. And
so you came over to teach acting and wound up acting in such performances. I mean, you're at the Amundsen in the Kennedy Center. That's the big time.
Oh yeah, and Richard's agent saw me in Washington and said, I'd like to represent you. So my wife and I decided to move to New York. And I got a job as associate director at the American Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford, Connecticut. And I was there for 2 years. So I didn't really, I acted in a couple of studio productions. At which point, I was back in L.A. for a visit. One of my ex-wife's girlfriends was now dating Lloyd Schwartz, who, of course, is the son of Sherwood Schwartz.
And who has been a guest on our podcast.
I'm sure he has been. He's had a varied and stellar career.
Yeah.
And so Lloyd and I have known each other that long.
Oh, my gosh. I had no idea that you guys were familiar.
And so Lloyd and I can't remember the name of the woman I was dating at the time, but Lloyd and Julie, the four of us went out for dinner, and Lloyd and his father were working on a show. It was one of those when they still did Saturday morning live action shows,
right?
Kids, and it was called Big John, Little John, and it starred Herb Edelman, and the premise was pretty good. He plays a teacher who takes his family to Florida on vacation and accidentally drinks from the fountain of youth. And so at the most inopportune times, he turns into a 6-year-old who now has a 30-year-old wife and a 12-year-old son, which is why it was called Big John, Little John. So I said, hey, I've got a great idea for a show, for an episode. So
you had not written for television or anything else at that point?
I hadn't written anything. I said, and he loved this idea. And he said, have you ever written anything? And I lied, and I said, sure. So I said,
it's okay, Philip, we all lie.
So for our listeners, sometimes to get your first break, you have to, hyperbole is a tool of the trade.
Yes, both on your resume. In fact, one of my colleagues here, Greg Bernstein, who now teaches at ASU, great guy. He's Elmer Bernstein's son, and looks so much like his dad. It's unbelievable. But Greg actually spends a couple of lectures, which means probably about 4 or 5 hours over the course of the semester, teaching resume building. How to present your resume, how to make it look as good as possible, shall we say?
Well, and how to answer that question, have you ever written anything or have you ever done anything?
Well, I kind of fudged and said, yes, I did a couple of things in England.
Sure.
And, of course, this was pre-Internet Movie Database. How is he going to know?
Sure.
You can't look it up.
Sure.
Unless, of course, he got on the phone and called somebody, which obviously he did. So I went down to the library and found a book on how to write for television and came up with an outline for this episode, which was called Peter Panic. So I wrote the story, the process of getting an episode written, and they made some changes, and I went and I wrote the first draft, and they loved it. And then they introduced me. This was Lloyd. I had Lloyd to thank for this. Lloyd said, if you're going to write comedies, they like teams. They feel happier with a writing team rather than an individual, which in actual fact at that time was true, if you remember.
Uh-huh.
So he put me together with another young writer, Bruce Kalish, who you may know, and if you don't, you should get him to do an interview because, again, you would really enjoy it. And Bruce's parents, Rocky and Irma Kalish, had been in the business for years. They were both, prominent members of the Writers Guild. And were working on, a number of shows at Tandem and Toy, which were the two big comedy companies at that time, if you recall.
Sure.
And so Bruce and I started doing the rounds. And
tell our listeners what that means.
Wait a minute, I want to ask Philip a question first. Philip, are you a funny guy?
Not really. No, I don't.
I've always thought of you as kind of a very nice, serious kind of English man.
But he's a wisecracker, that's for sure.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But I wouldn't say that, hilarity ensues when I sit down at a party. Yeah.
Got it.
But I think there's a difference between joke writers and comedy writers.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons I got out of comedy was I didn't want to sit in a room with 6 people day after day coming up with gags.
Right.
Which in those days, that's what sitcoms were. A classic story. Bruce and I don't know if you remember a show called Carter Country.
Yep.
It was a sitcom with Victor French playing. This is when Jimmy Carter was in the White House. And it was a comedy about a Southern sheriff played by Victor French. And we wrote a couple of episodes, and we were getting our notes on our next draft, and the door, the two writers, the two exec producers, supervising producers, were Doug Arango and Phil Duran. I don't know if you remember them. And all of a sudden the door opens, no knock. The door just opens, and Bud Yorkin is standing there with an armful of next week's scripts. And he tosses them on the floor, and he says, "You call that 100 gags?"
Wow.
And walks out the door.
That was the criterion.
That was his criterion. He would count the number of gags.
Yeah, I recall I had written some kind of light fare once, and I was criticized for not having 3 jokes on every page.
That was exactly his criterion.
Yeah.
3 gags per page.
Yeah.
So, which is why I eventually got out of that.
Let's go back. You and Kalish are making the rounds. What does that mean?
That means by this time we had an agent because we both worked on Big John, Little John. So we were now in those days you could get into the guild on one script.
The guild being the Writers Guild of America, which is kind of a difficult thing to gain entry to. How did you get your first agent?
Basically through Lloyd Schwartz.
So even at those early stages of a career, it really is about getting some help and being in touch with the right people and having them like you, isn't it?
It's what I say to all my students that are about to graduate. Your last summer before you graduate, get an internship in L.A. or New York. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Right.
And if you do that internship properly, you should be getting when you graduate, come back and see us and we'll have a job for you. And that actually happens to a lot of my students for that reason. They know why they're going. So, again, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah. So you have your first agent, and you and Bruce are shopping yourselves, basically.
So they lined us up a number of shows. One of them was Quincy. Why they sent us up for Quincy, I have no idea.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly a barrel of laughs, that show.
No, it was it was a medical examiner show.
And it was as I recall, it was kind of a difficult show to get assignments on because it was such a hit, and Jack Klugman had huge sway over those scripts. If he didn't like the writer or the script, you were never going to write for that show.
Oh, anyway, so Bruce and I, went down to the library. We did a lot of heavy research because it was a medical show, right? Mm-hmm. And we came in with 4 really good ideas. And I cannot remember the name of the producer that we met with. We pitched the 3rd idea. He kind of liked and said, "I'll think about it." The 4th idea, he said, "Stop. We're already doing that idea."
A very common response, right?
So I said, "Okay." And sure enough, about 6 weeks later, that show was on the air. And of course, who's to know? The minute we left the room, he said, "That was a great idea. Let's do that one." I mean, there's no way to prove that. And he ripped us off totally. We wrote about an 8-page outline for the 3rd idea, which he liked. And we never heard from him again. And that show was on the air, heavily disguised, about 6 months later.
Welcome to Hollywood.
Welcome to Hollywood. Anyway, we finally got a break. There was a sitcom with Don Rickles called CPO Sharkey.
Right.
And
he played a Navy NCO, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
By and large, I cannot remember. I think the name of the exec producer was Aaron Rubin. Anyway, so Bruce and I again did our homework, and we came in with 6 ideas for episodes. And one of them, he said, "Oh, I like that one. Let's do that one." So we went home, wrote the outline. They said, "The outline is so good, we'll give you your notes over the phone." So we went to first draft, sent the first draft in, and of course in those days you actually physically delivered it, unless you wanted to mail it, which of course no one did.
That's right. Yeah, there were no faxes, no internet, none of that. So you and Bruce you're coming off of a half-hour Saturday morning light fare, and you're out there pitching Quincy, which is one of the heavier drama shows of the era, and then you're writing and selling to what's really a half-hour comedy.
Yeah, well, essentially that was Barry Perlman was the name of the agent. You've probably come across Barry.
He used to be my agent.
Yeah, I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
so we didn't hear back from them. So after about a week, we had, plucked up the courage. We thought, God, if they cut us off at first draft, which they can do, and so we called up and we said, you never called us to give us notes on the second draft. And he said, oh, well, we're really behind the gun right now. We really needed an episode right away. Yours was terrific. In fact, we're going to shoot it next week. Would you like to come to the taping?
And you hadn't even done a second draft?
No. They just said, we'll take the first draft and run with it. Thank you.
Wow. That's a huge compliment.
Now, Philip, up until this point, did you know who Don Rickles was?
Vaguely, yes.
Because speaking about writing comedy, this guy was king of the comedy at that point.
Oh, he was huge, and and obviously a very specific style. Like later on, you had to find the specific style for Robin Williams, in Mork. Anyway, so Bruce and I went to the taping, and if you've ever been to a sitcom, they usually have one or two guys to warm up the audience before the taping starts. Get the audience in a laughing mood. And he said, and in the audience tonight are the writers of tonight's episode, Bruce Kalish and Philip Taylor. We stood up, we took a bow. The taping started. We did not recognize one single line.
Well, I love it.
They had changed everything.
They liked your script. They liked your script so much they didn't really use it.
So they even changed. There was one line, something about Jerry's pool hall, and they changed it to Shorty's chicken shack.
Well, that's
so I asked
a major change.
But every single line was changed.
So
it was the same story. So during the break, Aaron Ruman came up to us and he said, "So what do you think?" And I said, "You changed everything." He said, "Yeah, but you gave us good bones."
That's interesting. So in the world of comedy, frequently rewrites go on until 15 minutes before they shoot.
Let me say, the shows that I worked on, basically, you get no time off during the season, the shooting season, because you're working on your own stuff over the weekend, because that's the only time you get. Monday morning, the first thing that happens is this week's script that you're going to shoot or tape on Friday goes to table. That's what they call it. That means everyone sits down around a big table. The cast, obviously, the director, the writing staff, the producing staff, the studio staff, the production company, and, of course, the network representatives. And you read through the script. And then everybody is taking notes and giving notes. And then the director takes the cast off to start blocking. And the writing staff now goes back and starts working on the rewrites and working on all the notes that you've been given.
And the notes all are given to you pursuant to that table read or during the table read. And most of the notes are given to you by people who can't write.
By the network executives, yeah.
Right.
And then sometimes you'll get an obvious thing, like the director will come up and say, we hired the wrong woman to play this mother. Can we write her out?
Perfect.
Stuff like that as well.
Perfect. So the one of the skill sets, once you're on a show or you're writing for a show or your script is there at a table read, you really have to be facile and agile, don't you? I mean, you can't dig your heels in and say, no, we can't do that.
Oh, no. Otherwise you won't be coming back.
Right.
So that first night, usually, I can't remember a time when we got out of there. We liked to work beyond 7 o'clock because at 7 o'clock they are required to feed you. And so you would order in. And I'm not talking McDonald's. I mean, there are 6 to 8 people in a room. The bill was usually at least $400 or $500.
Always pretty good food, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. And we would order from the best restaurants around Paramount.
The reason they had to feed you after 7?
Basically because we usually went on till 1 or 2 in the morning.
And so that became a little bit of a tactic. We're going to sit around and BS most of the afternoon and wait for dinner time, and then we'll get to work, right?
Sometimes we would play liar's poker.
Right.
So, anyway, after that, Bruce and I, ironically, we became, we started working on a lot of the black sitcoms. What's Happening? Good Times. In fact, I still get residual checks from Good Times.
Now, I'd like to point out that, Philip, you are not black. You are, in fact, one of the more pale people I've ever known.
Well, we got this reputation. It was the Limey and the Jew were writing all these black sitcoms, which was hysterical.
And had you, I mean, that's a very unique point of view and comedy culture. How did you become fluent with that?
Well, there were no black people working on the show.
Right.
This was the late 70s.
Right. There were very few minorities working in the business, even.
Very few minorities working in the business.
Yeah.
Anyway, so after a while, we started working on a regular basis, and then we actually did a spec script at the suggestion of Barry Perlman for Mork and Mindy. And it was called Dr. Morkenstein, and actually... Bruce and I were very proud because when Robin died, the final, Mork calling Orson, remember every episode ended up with Mork reporting back to Orson? He actually sincerely cried in that episode because it was about a robot that was being put to sleep. In other words, he was being disconnected.
Now, for our listeners who may be a little bit younger than us, Mork and Mindy, the show that Philip is talking about, starred Pam Dauber, a very attractive, cute actress, and a young comedian who had really come off of a stand-up career by the name of Robin Williams. Then this was his first real introduction to the American audience. So you were there at the beginning of one of the most impactful careers in show business history.
Oh, no question. And, Robin played Mork, who is an alien and who comes to visit Earth and stays with Mindy, a young Earth woman, played by Pam.
I don't know how much value I have in this universe, but I do know that I made a few people happier than they would have been without me. And as long as I know that, I'm as rich as I ever need to be. So I'll catch you on the rebound, your magnitude. Until next week. Nanu! Nanu!
I think I read that Gary Marshall had him on Happy Days.
And that's when he said, we've got to write it.
Exactly. And he saw the extraordinary talent, and he decided to give him a series. That's talent for you.
Yeah, he said, we got to build a series around this guy. And if I remember, Mork was one of the characters that Robin would use in his stand-up routine. Mm-hmm. And so that was the development of Mork and Mindy. And in this particular episode, Dr. Morkenstein, he meets, in fact, we used the robot that, Robbie the robot that was in Forbidden Planet, the same robot. In fact, he did a lot of work over the years. His owner got the work, of course. And Roddy McDowell played the voice of the robot. Anyway, by the end of it, the robot literally is disconnected and dies. And in the end, Mork reports to Orson about his discovery about humans and love and death. And he started to cry. Quite genuinely, Robin started to cry. And so when he passed away, a number of people put that little Mork calling Orson episode up on YouTube, which Bruce and I were quite touched by.
What was it like? What was it like writing for a guy who was known for going off script?
Well, the thing is, you would go to a party, and people would say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm a writer. I work on Mork and Mindy." And they would say, "Well, doesn't he just make it up?" And so we had to explain, no. The great thing about working with Robin is you would come up with some lines, and sometimes you go, the button to the scene isn't very strong, but you knew that Robin would come up with a better one. And you always did. Yeah. But the amazing thing was, after you get through, I kind of went off base with the schedule, but at least 2 nights during the week, you would be there until 1 or 2 in the morning. And then the tape day, you would basically, in the morning, make any final touch-ups to the script that was going to be shot that afternoon. And then you'd be working on next week's script. Usually the supervising producer would say, okay, you take the first act, you take the second act, we need to brush up this and this and this. And then, of course, all that would change again on Monday when it went to table. Then in the afternoon, you would obviously watch the run-through, which was always taped because you might use some of it. And then during the 2-hour break, you would go back, order in dinner, and work on rewrites based on what you just saw on the first interaction with the live audience. And then, of course, you would do the second taping.
Now, one of the things I want to point out for our listeners, when you're working on staff, you're there every day of the week, and you're there many evenings of the week. You're collecting a weekly paycheck, aren't you? You're getting a real salary.
Very handsome paycheck,
and it's a high salary. I mean, $4,000 a week, something like that, is kind of beginning rate.
Yeah.
For a story editor or kind of a junior writer position. And then,
back then, yes, that was about right.
And then when you're writing a script for which you get credit, I mean, scripts in those days, I think they were paying about $15,000.
Yes, for a half hour. Yeah.
Right, for a half-hour script. So you could make a substantial income. The problem is, it was very exhausting. I mean, you earned it. I mean, people hear about those salaries and think, oh my gosh, what a great business to get into. But you don't have any personal life at that point, do you?
No. And basically, as I said, on the weekend, you're trying to write your own work so that you can get scripts in to get that extra money.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And of course, what a lot of people, I never came across this, but I know a lot of other people that, and you and I have talked about this, where you hire a freelance writer, and then you completely rewrite a script and take the credit, so you get more money because the Writers Guild says you now wrote that script. You know, we never did that.
Right. Yeah, a lot of producers are in the habit of just putting their name on every single script they ever see,
exactly.
and letting the Writers Guild. There's an arbitration process, the Writers Guild, wherein a half a dozen writers will look at material in all of its incarnations and all the drafts, and they will determine who contributed the majority of the material and assign credit thereby. But exactly. a lot of producers will do that, and
then the original writer doesn't get as much credit.
He doesn't get as much. Doesn't get as much residuals, and those producers, in my experience, are to be avoided because it is about the getting paid for what you do, and a lot of guys make it difficult.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah.
So I just have one little more story for you.
Yeah.
So. Once you've done the second taping, which doesn't take half an hour, of course, it can take 2.5 hours, because there are set changes, breaks, and then once the audience has gone home, usually fled the theater because they don't realize how long it's going to take, then you do pickups. You know, we blew this line, or this line didn't come across right, so you're there for at least another half an hour. So by the time you get out of there, it's midnight. And, you know, often we would go because by now we are so awake, having been through this for all day.
There's also a lot of coffee on the set.
A lot of coffee, and back in those days there was a lot of other stuff going around as well. And so Robin would then sometimes take us all down to the Improv, and there was another comedy club right at the corner of Sunset and Laurel Canyon. I cannot remember the name of it. It's not there anymore.
The Comedy Store.
Was it the Comedy Store?
I think so. Mitzi Shore's place?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was Sunset and Laurel?
Right.
Oh, okay.
I think it's still there.
I don't think it is. Well, anyway. And I remember one night, I mean, don't forget, he'd been working nonstop, since like 1 o'clock that morning with a little break for dinner. He got up on the stage. This was sheer improv, of course. And he said to the audience, "Give me 3 things in the news." So I remember one of them was 3 Mile Island.
Right.
I can't remember what the other 2 were. He proceeded to do a 10-minute Shakespeare play in blank verse based on those 3 items in the news.
Yeah, that's a gift. I mean,
the man was just a genius. He really was.
Yeah, it's almost like he was touched spiritually with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It's not anything that can be taught. Believe me.
Right. So you're working on Mork and Mindy on staff, and what happens then?
Bruce and I were asked And it was lucky because right about the time that they were considering Mork marrying Mindy, Bruce and I going, this is not going to work. In other words, we could see it was a very short-lived show. You know, the first thing they did was they married Mork to Mindy, which Bruce and I were never happy about. And then down the road, of course, they brought on Jonathan Winters, to help things move along. But the show really was one of those flash bang hits, because you couldn't really sustain that level of comedy, for the 8, 10, or 12 years, something like Cheers, But fortunately, around about that time, there was another show that was starting up at Paramount called Struck by Lightning, starring our old friend Jack Elam.
Sure.
Who used to live around the corner from you.
Right.
I remember going out and visiting him several times. He's no longer with us, of course. And Jack Elam played Jeff Kramer, who was the assistant sheriff in Jaws, if you remember. Really a nice guy. Became a studio executive. Jeff Kramer played, I think he was an attorney in New York, not doing well, and he gets this letter announcing that his only relative has died and left him a hotel in Maine. And he figures, what have I got to lose? So he goes up and he starts to run this hotel, which is pretty much of a dump. And there's a very, very strange janitor, played by Jack Elam, who, it turns out, is Frankenstein's monster, and has been living there for 200 years. He came over from Europe. And so Frankenstein's monster is the janitor in this place. So we thought this was a cute idea. We went on staff, and the show basically, I think, ran 6 episodes on the air. It just died.
So this points out the aspect of a writing career. You really do need to make the right choices. A lot of opportunities can be presented, but if you choose incorrectly, you can have a very short economic year.
Oh, yeah. Believe me. But again, we were paid extremely well on that show. Mm-hmm. It was extraordinarily popular in Italy for some reason, where they aired all the episodes. Go figure. Well, of course, they loved Jack Elam in Italy because of the westerns he used to do.
Right.
So, it was at that point that I decided I didn't want to sit around in a room anymore with a bunch of other writers coming up with gags. So I announced to Bruce that I was going to try to go more dramatic on my own.
So at this point, Philip, was acting just put on the back burner for you?
Basically, I never had time to do it again. In fact, I never did it again. Not that I recall. Yep.
Was this a regret at all during this time, or were you just enjoying?
There were times when I go, I wonder what would have happened if. I really had a great time when I was in the Royal Shakespeare Company. In fact, I was working with Judi Dench for 2 years.
Sure.
So yeah, there are times when I go, I wonder what if I'd stayed on or gone back. Anyway, so Bruce and I broke up amicably. In fact, we're still good friends. And I didn't get employed for a year. Oh, no, I tell a lie. We did one episode of The Incredible Hulk, which Bruce Johnson had gone on to work on. He had been on Mork Mindy. And after that's when Bruce and I went our separate ways. And that's when I didn't get employed for a year.
So now you're a freelance writer. You have an agent. A lot of stuff on your resume. What do you do for that year?
You basically keep coming up with your own ideas. And I wrote a spec script, an hour-long comedy thriller spec script, which in actual fact over the years got me a lot of work. Everyone would read it and say, well, we love this. Of course, we'd never do this series, but we love your work. So it got me a lot of work. In fact, it got me more work than my agent. And it was optioned 3 times.
So the lesson there for people who think the writing career is constant employment is that it's not, but that when you're not being paid, you need to continue working so that you
create your own opportunities.
Exactly.
So anyway, finally, I started to work again. I was now on hour-long shows. And I did, Bruce actually was now on The Fall Guy. So I did that, and did a bunch of other stuff.
Well, you did Silk Stockings. You worked on Murder, She Wrote, The Highlander.
Yeah, again, it's Who You Know. I had done a pilot for ABC, which was under the auspices of Bruce Lansbury, Angela Lansbury's brother.
Right, who had been a producer on the original Mission Impossible.
Exactly, yeah, sweet man.
Uh-huh.
And we, in fact, we became good friends, as you well know. And Bruce and I really hit it off working on this pilot, which was never picked up. But again, I did several pilots for ABC and made quite good money writing these 1 hour, 2 hour pilots. They were never picked up, but it's a pretty good living, as you well know.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how much work a television writer does that doesn't always get shot, and you can have quite a good career never seeing your stuff go to film.
I had one series which we thought was a shoo-in. In fact, they loved the idea. They loved the idea at ABC, I thought of the idea right before Red Heat came out, which, if you remember, was Arnold Schwarzenegger playing a Russian cop that comes to this country.
Right.
I came up with this idea called Foreign Body about a female Sherlock Holmes type of character. She's a Russian. She's like the greatest detective in Russia. And she comes to collect her husband's body, who was a concert pianist who was killed in Central Park. And, of course, she runs into trouble. She can't go back home. She teams up with, opposites attract. She teams up with, an American detective, and they don't like each other at first, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, they loved the script. I was working on my second draft notes thinking, this is going to really go. Great, casting, Russian, Greta Garbo and Keanu Reeves, that kind of casting. The Russian wall fell. The Berlin Wall fell. And everyone said, the series has gone out the window.
Sure.
And I said, well, maybe she could be Cuban. She comes from Havana. But at that point, they throw out the baby with the bathwater. And that happens, that happens a lot. I had another series with, I won't mention the name of the actor, but you and I know him quite well, that I developed for quite a well-known actor. And I did not know this at the time, but when we went in to pitch it at NBC, he was out of town, and we purposely had chosen that so that it didn't look like he was locked into the show, because his Q rating was a little on the slide at that time. So we thought he wanted to be on, in terms of, being a producer or something. And who shows up at the pitch but his manager? And we're in pitching to the exec at NBC, and the exec at NBC loves this show. He's saying, oh, you know what we could do? We could do this. You've got him out, right? And at the end, as we were going out, the manager says to the NBC exec, oh, by the way, you do know that X is attached as the leading actor in this. And we never heard from him again.
So he wasn't that desirable. So sometimes you can attach yourself to talent that doesn't necessarily help.
Exactly. That they throw out the baby with the bathwater again.
So the lesson there is, if you're going to attach actors to your project, make sure it's somebody they want.
Well, in all fairness, he brought the idea to me.
Uh-huh.
And I was developing it. And he led me to believe that he wanted to be the producer on this project. Not because, to be quite honest, he was too old for the lead at that point in his career.
So after you're doing all this freelance work and you're out there pitching yourself and picking up a tremendous amount of work on every show in the world, from the Brady Brides to 8 Is Enough, the Fall Guy, talk to me about Lust in the Dust.
That came out of, again, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I was dating Tab Hunter's publicity agent.
Philip, I'm seeing a theme here, and that's that women have had a great impact on your career.
Coincidentally, I just happened to be dating her.
There were a lot of interesting relationships, and I think it's not a bad thing. It's just life, right? I mean, we are influenced. Absolutely. We are influenced by our relationships.
I probably would not. In fact, I almost certainly would not have gotten Lust in the Dust if I hadn't been dating her at the time.
Okay, so how did that all happen?
she mentioned the fact that she represented Tab Hunter, and Tab was looking for a writer to write this crazy idea he had for a parody Western, starring himself in Divine. I went, Divine? Okay. So I met with Tab.
For our listeners, Divine was a major star in John Waters films, and if you haven't seen a John Waters film, get the children out of the room, lower the lights, kind of cutting edge satirical stuff.
Divine, George, his real name. Divine was a 350-pound transvestite. Which is what he played in Lust in the Dust. And we wrote the script, or I wrote the script, based on Tab's few ideas that he had. And in his book, of course, I'm never mentioned. It's like Tab mysteriously wrote this on his own. We cast it. We got Paul Bartel, who was really a hot director at the time, to direct it. I didn't think he did a very good job. And then Tab pulled in, a lot of markers. And so we got some wonderful people to play smaller roles, like Cesar Romero, Juliette Lewis's dad, Woody Strode, Leni Kazan. So it was really a great cast. And it's really become a cult Western now, particularly in Europe, where they have festivals, based on Divine, and Lust in the Dust is always shown. It was one of those weird things that just cropped up. Based on that, because that was a New World production,
right?
I started becoming not the go-to guy, but I started doing a bunch of work for instance, they were developing a show called Forever Night, which is about a vampire detective. Jim Parriott had written the pilot, and CBS said, we're not quite sure where this goes. Can we see a generic episode? In other words, an episode, let's say, can we see episode 6? We need to see where this is going to go on a regular basis.
And when you say they want to see it, they want to see the script.
They want to see the script. So New World asked me if I'd do that, and then they really liked that episode, which was, I used Joan of Arc in some flashbacks, which they really enjoyed. In fact, people still email me about that episode. And then I did a 2-hour pilot for She-Hulk. This was way, way before, obviously, Marvel Comics became Marvel Comics.
Right.
And that's when Zorro came along.
When daggers are pointed at innocent hearts and muskets are ready to fire, where tyrants ride high and govern with fear as the forces of evil conspire, then from out of the night a hero must rise with courage that even a mask won't disguise. They turn to the man called Zorro.
Tell us how that really occurred and what your introduction to that show was.
I think it was because I cannot remember his name. He was working at New World. He was their development executive. Michael, you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I want to say Klein, but that's not it. And he became a director.
He directed several episodes. Anyway, I was working with him, I think, on She-Hulk. And he said, we're doing this Zorro series. We're thinking of doing the Zorro series. And so, do you want to go and meet the guys? So I came down and met with you and Gary Goodman. And then 4 years later, we were still having fun. It was certainly one of the best experiences I've ever worked on.
Well, exactly. Well, my quick story about how that all occurred was I had been brought on to write and produce the show with Goodman Rosen, the two guys who had negotiated rights from John Gertz, and they had actually shot a pilot, and they showed me that pilot.
That's right. Yes.
Which I believe they had cast a guy named Patrick James in. And while he was a good actor, he wasn't Don Diego. He didn't have the ability to play both the effete, erudite guy and the action guy. He was much more of an action actor.
And he tended, if I recall, to really overdo the effete part.
Yeah. He was just a little too muscular, I'll put it that way. At any rate, they said, we want you to meet this writer. He's English. I said, are you crazy? An English guy? This is about early California. We need somebody who knows, a little bit about Mexico and Spaniards and things like that. And you and I met, and I think we had a very good initial meeting. And we talked about nothing having to do with the show, but mostly about other stuff in show business and people we knew in common. And we kind of began to establish a friendship long before you came on the show. And what happened was, I believe you wrote a first script, and I said, this is really good stuff. Let's go with this. And
if I can interrupt there for a second.
Sure.
I think, it's really hard sometimes to find a balance when you're writing historical material, because that wasn't a Western as such. You don't want historical material to sound like Hamlet, which is what a lot of people tend to overwrite. In fact, we had some freelance scripts from freelance writers where we had to redo the dialogue for that reason. It was a little too flowery. So I think my English background helped in finding a nice balance, as to how the dialogue sounded, in California in 1823.
Right. So you came on the show as a story editor, I believe, and
yeah, something like that.
Became executive story editor, and you and I worked very closely together for all 88 episodes. And it was probably the best collaborative relationship I've ever had. In that,
no question. Yeah,
we managed to know each other's writing voice so well you couldn't distinguish who had written what.
And to this day, I probably couldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah,
and also, we wrote. I think like 80% of the scripts.
Well, exactly. Certainly our hand was in all of them.
Yeah.
Because we'd bring writers in, and sometimes they wouldn't quite understand the rhythm of Don Diego, and plotting was a little ploddy, if you will. Tell me what your impression is, because you went to Spain and you actually performed in an episode as an actor.
That's the only other time I've acted. I conveniently forgotten that episode. Yeah.
No, it was hysterical, and you were terrific, particularly on horseback. I enjoyed that immensely. Tell me what
horse. I wanted to shoot that horse.
Tell our listeners what that set was like in Spain.
Well, the cantina. I was extraordinarily impressed with the cantina. There were a number of standing sets, obviously, the cantina and the hacienda were the two main sets. And I thought, who was the designer? I can't remember.
Neither can I. But what was that day like for you being on that set?
Sorry, how do you mean?
Well, as an actor, being on the set with Ray Austin directing and Duncan Regehr and Patrice Comey. And
well, I can tell you one thing, it was hot.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, we're talking about the summer in Spain.
Right. I hope they kept you hydrated, Philip.
Yes. Yeah, I think they did. But the outside scenes were pretty tough, especially when the horse I got was not particularly well trained, as I recall. And, I've been on horseback. In fact, my ex-wife and I used to ride quite a bit. But it was really uncomfortable in that kind of weather. It was really quite hot and dusty most of the time, if you remember.
Sure. But what was your shooting day like? I mean, there aren't many writers who have the experience of being put in costume and then thrown into scenes.
Basically, you were up incredibly early in the morning. The hotel we were staying at in Madrid was quite a distance from. It was about half an hour, 45 minutes away, wasn't it?
Yeah, a real commute.
And then, of course, you have to go through costume. You have to go through makeup. But the thing that a stage actor doesn't realize about filming is the endless waiting time that you have, between shots. Everything, or particularly between setups. Sometimes, you'll do one take, and the director will go, "Can you slow that down a bit, or can you maybe just glance at Zorro during that speech?" And you do it again. But then, now, everything goes into a different setup. So the cameras have to be moved. Maybe a flat that was taken away from the camera in this particular angle now has to be replaced. The lighting has to be realigned. And so you just sit around, and you have coffee and you start eating. There's always, a food table on every set. And, I don't think most people realize until they actually do it just how long the waiting time is when you're shooting a film. And if you're in a non-air-conditioned environment or you're outside and you don't have air-conditioned trailers, it can be really uncomfortable.
And what was it like acting in a script that you had written? I mean, that must have been...
Actually, I didn't write that one. I rewrote it, I think, but it was by someone else. I can't remember. It was a freelance script. And since I was going to be there, I don't know if it was your idea or Gary Goodman's, to say, well, since Philip's going to be there, let's have him do it. I do recall doing a lot of the rewrite on that particular part of the hack writer. And so it's what I call the cow serving in the milk bar. I don't think it's usually a good idea for an actor to perform his own work. Or for a writer to perform his own work, I should say. But I think it went quite well.
Yeah, I imagine it was very challenging. So we were on Zorro for 4 solid years, cranking material out, traveling back and forth to Spain. And when that show came to an end, where'd you go from there?
Actually, I did quite a nice segue into Highlander, which was another Goodman-Rosen production, based on the movie of that name, of course. And I was brought in... Originally, I was brought in as... I think I was just going to write one episode. And the producer at that time, the executive producer, was a gentleman who actually has done a lot of pilots and a lot of work over the years. Excuse me, I'm going to get some water here. My voice is getting a little cracked. I will not mention his name, but he was the supervising producer on the show. Barry Rosen and Gary Goodman had hired this guy, and he had written the pilot. So I was writing, I think it was like episode 2 or episode 3. I wrote it, and apparently what had happened was that there was a lot of European money involved in Highlander. German money, French money, and English money. And so the pilot script went out, written by this gentleman, and obviously, based on the movie. And all of a sudden, Gary Goodman got a phone call from the German people involved in the show, saying, we read the pilot, where is Connor McLeod? Which was the Christopher Lambert role in the original movie.
Right.
And they said, oh, no, you don't understand. This is his kinsman, Duncan MacLeod, his cousin. They said, when we agreed to put money into this, you promised that Christopher Lambert would be in the pilot, which everyone had conveniently forgotten. So, but at which point they were getting very unhappy with this gentleman who'd written the pilot, and they fired him. And then Kevin Droney and I were both made supervising producers, and we sat down and we rewrote the pilot, writing Connor MacLeod in. At which point, of course, we had to find if Christopher Lambert was available. And, of course, his agent knew what the problem was, and we paid him a phenomenal amount of money for 4 days' work.
Funny how supply and demand can raise prices.
Exactly. Anyway, so we did the pilot with Christopher Lambert, which also introduces his kinsman, Duncan MacLeod, Adrian Paul, who, of course, obviously played Highlander for the rest of the series. And so Kevin and I were co-supervising producers. And it was at this point that my wife and I had decided that we wanted to get out of L.A. And so...
Well, there was a little earthquake episode, as I recall.
This was before then. We were just... in fact, we had spent a few weeks in Italy, and we came back, which we loved, and we came back, and we were sitting in traffic on Santa Monica Boulevard, and I said, I don't want to live here anymore. You know, and I was doing pretty well, you know. I mean, so it was a major decision. And so we started looking at places. We went up and down the coast. And, you know, obviously I needed to be within commuting distance of L.A. And then finally some friends of ours that I knew from New York, they had moved back to Scottsdale, Arizona. And we came out and spent a weekend with them, and we went, oh, we really like it here. And it's an hour's flight. So we came out for New Year's Eve, 1994. Well, actually, New Year's Eve was 1993. And we were sat in our hotel room on New Year's Eve, and we said, when the season of Highlander is over, which I think we wrapped in, like, April, we're going to come out and start looking for a house. And 4 days later, we went back home, and the Northridge earthquake happened. And we said, I don't think we're going to wait. I think we're going to go now. And so we started coming out every weekend, and on the third weekend, we found a house, and we moved. So we were moved by the time that Highlander finished that season. And I left the shows. I couldn't stay on and be, you know, live in Scottsdale. So I went back to doing freelance work.
And commuting from Scottsdale, Arizona to Hollywood.
At one point, I worked for you on Soldier of Fortune, which was the Mercenary series.
Right.
And I was commuting. I was flying into Burbank Airport on Monday morning and flying home Friday evening. And I did that for 6 months, I think it was.
And that's before the internet, before a lot of the tools that we have today. So how did you find writing? I mean, you'd done so many different kinds of things in writing. Soldier of Fortune was yet again something completely outside of your bailiwick. You'd never been a mercenary. You'd never been in the military. How do you handle things like that? Here, quick, Philip, we need a script on Soldier of Fortune. You know nothing about that world.
I think you call that a quick study.
How do you do that?
I'm trying to remember how I came up with the idea. I think actually, because you were looking for scripts in a hurry, if I recall, and you said, I'd like you to come on the show because I want someone to watch my back that I know. And I think you gave me like 4 or 5 different ideas. You know, they were like one-liners.
Yeah, but we were just making that stuff up, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there was one that really, you know, triggered my imagination. And I went down to the library and did some research. You know, one of the things when I started off writing for TV, you know, I would go, oh, I need to know what kind of rifle this ex-Marine would keep in his closet at home. I had no idea. I couldn't pick up the phone and find anybody because, well, I didn't know anybody. So I'd have to do research. Now, of course, you can find that out in 10 seconds.
Right. The world has changed. The world has changed.
The world has changed a lot. So I did some research. You know, the old adage, which I always used to tell my screenwriting students at ASU this all the time, they always tell you, write what you know, to which I add, and if you don't know, go and find out.
Perfect.
Because how much do you know?
Exactly. Particularly when you're young and beginning, I think a lot of young writers are kind of intimidated by the fact they don't have a lot of experience in a particular field. But today, if you're able to conduct research, you can write just about anything. It really just takes determination and those writing skills. Yeah, you know, you mentioned Arizona State University and you're teaching there, and I note that you are among the most highly regarded faculty members there. There are a number of websites where students get to rank their professors, and you are known as very, very tough, but among the best. And there are even comments online about you. If you're going to take any screenwriting class, take this guy's class. Now, that's saying a lot. There are a lot of people out there saying they're screenwriting teachers. Tell us about how you got into Arizona State University and what your academic life has been like.
Well, there was one point when, obviously because I was no longer in Los Angeles, and my writing career started to wind down. Plus, I was, heading into my late 50s, early 60s.
We don't talk age here, Philip.
And as we both know, Hollywood tends to turn its nose up, at writers when their hair starts to go gray. In fact, you and I were involved in a suit, if you remember, over this.
I do indeed.
And so I thought, I've got to reinvent myself. And so I had a friend who was teaching, someone I had just met socially, who was teaching at ASU. And so at that point, they had what were called extended ed courses. They were 3 weekends. It was 12 hours every weekend, 4 hours on a Friday night, 8 hours on a Saturday for 3 weekends. And that was enough credits to qualify, for a course. And so I suggested a couple of ideas for courses along those lines, which they went, oh, that's a really good idea. And so I started teaching the extended ed courses. Then, and those were for the Department of Theater. There was no film department. Then a great guy called Miguel Valenti, he was brought in to start up a film area as part of the theater department. And at that point, they had to come up with a number of courses to qualify for a degree in film. And one of those, of course, was screenwriting. You had to have a screenwriting course. And so they asked me if I'd be interested. And suddenly I was on full-time faculty and basically was teaching screenwriting, intro to screenwriting, intermediate screenwriting, advanced screenwriting. Then I branched out and went into developing a TV series, which was a really popular course. And then Television Writers Workshop. So I basically did that for about 10 years. And
wow, you sounded busy.
That is, that's as busy as you want to make it, but you can't get away with, less than 60 hours a week.
That's a lot of hours.
60 hours.
Yeah, just the reading, reading the student scripts, which sometimes, of course, can be mind-numbing. But just reading, their scripts and their papers, takes up a huge amount of time. And it's not like you just read them and go, this is good or this sucks. You have to tell them why it's good or why it sucks. It's a huge amount of time. And so, actually, it was last year, I decided that I didn't want to be, coping with faculty meetings anymore and office hours. And so I made a proposal that I would only teach online. So the only time I basically go into ASU now is to record lectures for my online courses, which have really become popular.
Now, are your online courses available to the public?
Well, ASU Online now is hugely successful. I don't know if you heard about the deal with Starbucks they made.
No.
Any Starbucks employee can now take a free online degree at ASU.
Nice.
70 different ASU offers 70 different degrees online, all online courses. I've had students from Slovenia, Bermuda, Hawaii.
So for our listeners who are interested in learning screenwriting or learning more about you, is there a website? Where should they go?
Oh, no, I don't teach online screenwriting, or screenwriting online, I should say. Reason being, I don't think you can do it. I think to teach screenwriting, you have to look people in the eye. You have to be there in the room. You have to listen to them pitch. Part of a screenwriting course, my screenwriting course is you have to pitch your idea to me, because that's part of writing. Certainly part of television writing, as you well know, is being able to convey the idea to the person who's going to buy it. So I don't teach online screenwriting, screenwriting online, sorry. There are people at ASU that do teach screenwriting online, I honestly, I can't recommend them because I don't believe you can teach. I think it's a factory, a money-making factory for them. But I do not approve of teaching screenwriting online. The courses I teach are overview courses. I teach one, science fiction on film, war on film. I'm preparing a new one now, film genres, which is subtitled, Frankly, Clarice Used the Force. And then I've got one called From Lucy to Lost.
So how do we access these courses?
Basically, you go to if you Google ASU online, I mean anybody can sign up for what's called an I course, small I, and that is ASU's online department, and you'll find all the details there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Philip, you've had an amazing career. Tell us what you're up to these days.
Now I am in the final stages of preparing the film genres course. In fact, I start recording the lectures next week. And this will, once that's done, I will have 5 courses online. And it's almost like going into syndication. Once you've done the prep, then the actual running of the course and offering the course, is really easy. It's just a question of answering emails and grading papers at the end of the semester. Because the computer does all the quizzes for you. It grades all the quizzes for you. And so now I will have time to write something, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a secret.
Oh, my goodness. When can we know?
As soon as I need, it's on the back burner right now, and the way I write, and I've always written, is I let things simmer around in the back of my mind, and somehow subconsciously they begin to formulate. And suddenly I know how to approach this, and then I bring it to the forefront of my mind, and that's when I start to work. So and right now it's still simmering, it's still percolating.
That's what I call creative procrastination.
Yeah.
Writers look like they're not doing anything, but I think we're always writing, aren't we?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, no question.
Yeah, even though we're not sitting in front of a keyboard, things are percolating at all times. Well, Philip, this has been fascinating, and I just want to recommend that anyone go to ASU online and check you out, because the coursework you've offered and the success you've had as a teacher really kind of blows me away.
Philip, I wanted to ask you, we usually ask this question, any favorite actors you worked with that stand out in your mind?
Worked with or admire?
Admired, how's that?
Admire, I would say one of the reasons, apart from Rod Steiger, and totally the opposite, of course, would be Laurence Olivier. I mean, I grew up worshiping Olivier.
Well, that's a heavy name. That's a big name.
And so, I mean, as you think about Laurence Olivier and Rod Steiger, one was hugely method acting, and Olivier was, and I actually was fortunate enough, when I was at RADA, I got an internship at night at the National Theatre when Olivier was performing Othello, Uncle Vanya, and I got to see Olivier do Othello like 40 times, which was a phenomenal influence on my career, my acting career. As far as working with, I mentioned Judi Dench earlier. In fact, I once spent the night with Judi Dench.
Oh, another woman story.
Here we go again, Philip.
I'll tell. Here's the story. We were on tour with 12th Night, and I was playing her twin brother, Sebastian. And we arrived at our hotel in Sydney, and it was called the Bondi Beach Hotel. You've probably heard of Bondi Beach.
Sure.
And this place was a dive, and it was quite late at night. It was about 10 o'clock. And I went up to my room, and it was, not only was it dirty, but I turned on the faucet, and the water came out like brown for like 2 minutes before it finally turned clear.
So this is not a Four Seasons, okay?
This is not a Four Seasons. And so I went back downstairs to see if there was another room. And Judy had already beaten me to it. And she said, I want to speak to our manager, our touring manager. So they brought him down, and she said, you see that bus stop over there on the other side of the street? I'm going to stay in that bus stop until you find me a different hotel. And I said, me too. And so I walked over, and the two of us sat there for like 3 hours. So that's how I managed to spend the night with Judy.
Okay.
That's a good story.
An innocent night. So listen, as we wrap this up, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time in doing this, what advice would you give to the fledgling person who wants to come to Hollywood and make the career that Philip Taylor has had?
I would say the first thing is that you need to come with a portfolio of work. I would advise to approach television. They say this is the second golden age of television, and I would agree. But there is a huge amount of work available in television right now. It's much easier than it used to be to make that transition into film. But if you have this hoity-toity attitude of, I want to write a screenplay, the chances of that screenplay getting made now are pretty remote. Because the budgets for screenplays are really enormous. And which are they going to do? The Avengers, The Age of Dentures, 14th episode, or are they going to do your new script? Chances are they're going to do The Avengers. It's just, that's the Hollywood money-making machine. So concentrate on television to get your foot in the door and write a number of spec scripts of shows that are on the air that everyone knows. Don't write some weird thing that nobody ever watches. And then also write a few of your own scripts so that you basically, have some work of your own that someone says, do you have anything original? Here it is. So you should have at least 3 or 4 scripts, be it half hour or hour, depending on where you feel your strengths are. I think that's vital. And something that actually has happened to a number of my students, if you just go knocking on agents' doors, the chances are most of them won't even respond. If you knock on 100 doors or contact 100 agents, you'll be lucky if 1 or 2 respond and to say, oh, yes, I'll read your work. What I advise students, and it's happened on several occasions, is contact the supervising producer of a show that you'd like to work on. The supervising producer, as you know, Bob, is the person that basically has to deliver the script. And so contact him and say, I'd be interested in working as a writer's assistant, which means you make copy, take notes, do the typing, make sure that the rewrites get out to everyone that needs to see them. And on the second year, maybe come up with an idea for the show and ask if you can write an episode. You and I know that this happened with Gary Reek, you remember? In other words, what you're saying is get your foot in the door any way you can. Yeah. And then build those relationships. And I now have 2 of my best students. One of them is now literally writing her first script on American Horror Story.
That's a big show. Wonderful.
Where she was interning. And then I've got another one who's just started as writer's assistant on Night Shift, the NBC series. Uh-huh. So again, it's a backdoor way to get in, but you're employed at the same time.
So Philip, real quickly, since we're talking about television, what do you think about the Royals? The Royals, you mean the television show?
I started to watch it, and I got so I couldn't watch it.
You and me both.
So you don't appreciate the humor?
No, it's not British humor.
I know.
It's a little over the top.
Very over the top. Yeah.
A perfect example is House of Cards, which I'm sure you've seen, the Kevin Spacey series. Uh-huh. That is based on a British series, actually starring an actor that I worked with in the RSC, Ian Richardson, who you've seen on a million things. He's dead now. He passed away a couple of years ago. And Ian Richardson played that role. It is funny. It is gripping. In other words, the level of humor is slightly off, slightly more British, and to me, it's much more effective. I like the Kevin Spacey series, and I think Robin Wright is terrific. But I think if you manage to, you can on Netflix or Amazon. I think you can stream House of Cards, the English series, on Amazon. But there were 3 separate miniseries. There was House of Cards, the final To Kill a King, which was the second miniseries, and then the 3rd season was the final cut when he actually becomes Prime Minister. And to me, it's just that little shade of humor that's a little subtler and just more. It's more of an impact than the Netflix series. No, I'm sorry, I can't watch the Royals.
In short, the Royals is not your number one pick. Hey, listen, Philip, this has been terrific. I can't tell you how much we appreciate all this. I do want people to check you out online, and they'll find one of, I believe, one of the country's most esteemed writing instructors, and the more they can get of you, the better. All they have to do is Google you, and they'll see what kind of reviews you get from your students.
Thanks for your time, Philip.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
This has been amazing. Hope to see you real soon. Thanks again.
Okay. You take care.
Alrighty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I really love that story about Robin Williams.
But, Philip has worked with an awful lot of people.
But to go to the Comedy Store with him
that must have been a trip.
Awesome.
That must have been a trip.
I know for a fact that the Comedy Store is still open. It opened in 1972. It's over 40 years old.
Yeah, it's really a tradition, isn't it?
It's a happening place still, apparently.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great conversation with Philip. I want to remind everybody before we go, be sure to check out our website at wherehollywoodhides.com. You'll find our book there, Where Hollywood Hides Santa Barbara, Celebrities in Paradise, available with free shipping. You can always go to Amazon or find it at your local bookstore.
And we're very soon going to be turning the book into a soft cover.
Right. Be sure to check the website for our show notes. Every podcast has great links to products relating to the people we talk to, and you'll also find the Amazon banner there. I want to remind everybody, click on that Amazon banner for anything you're looking for, whether it's books, movies, bicycles, car parts, whatever. Amazon has everything. And when you use the banner on our website, we get a little bit of money. We appreciate the support. So until next time,
this is Suzanne.
And this is Bob.
See you at the movies. And today's music is provided by Chance McCullough. You can find more of his original soundtracks at chancemccullough.com.
And if you enjoyed today's podcast, please take a minute and give us a 5-star rating and a quick comment or review at iTunes/Where Hollywood Hides. Those reviews really do help get the word out. And drop by our Facebook page at facebook.com/Where Hollywood Hides and hit that like button.
From Chilicombes and Paducas with their bazookas to get their names up in lights.
All armed with photos from local rotos with their hair in ribbons and legs in tights. Hooray for Hollywood! You have no way of knowing who'll make good.
Maybe you'll be another Papa D on your name and neon. If you get lucky, you could. Yes, buddy, you'll arrive if you can top his 5. Hooray for Hollywood!
Hooray for Hollywood! Woolly Hollywood! They hire cowboys and then hang their chaps up and doll their maps up and give them all